Hello and welcome to this daily update from the Wildlife Trusts from COP26 in Glasgow. And things are really happening here in Glasgow already. Well, there was major speeches from world leaders yesterday. Of particular highlight, of course, were the speeches from the leaders of some of the poorest countries who were really emphasising how tackling climate change, stopping runaway climate change and keeping to 1.5 degrees of warming above pre-industrial levels is a matter of survival. You had the chair of the Small Island Developing States really emphasising it's a matter of life and death for those countries, the difference between 1.5 degrees and higher. So the scene has really been set here early in Glasgow, just how important these talks are and just how critical it is that we stop burning fossil fuels, move a lot faster in tackling the climate emergency, and of course making sure that we put nature in such a state that it can help us in tackling the climate emergency. Just overnight, there's been the news, of course, that hundreds of these world leaders have come together and agreed a new demand, a new agreement to end and reverse deforestation by 2030. And this is significant and welcome, of course, but there's a danger that we've seen this before, we've heard this before. There was an agreement made in 2015 between leaders to end deforestation and it's failed to do so. So we absolutely need to see the delivery done right this time and make sure those leaders and those countries follow through on the commitments that they made here to end and reverse deforestation.
So as Craig was saying, we saw a huge amount of activity at the conference centre yesterday. As part of the Global Leaders Summit, we saw the big announcement on deforestation. And it was interesting being there and feeling the atmosphere of the place. So in the blue zone, the UN negotiation zone where all this was taking place, you know, the atmosphere is very hectic, very fast paced, an awful lot of people. We know there were queues for 2 hours to get into the conference yesterday, so quite a busy day for a lot of people. But I also spent some time over the river in the green zone, which is the UK presidency area where a lot of the public events and the exhibitions are as well. And it's got a completely different atmosphere. It's much more relaxed, quite a pleasant place to be actually, and huge amounts of information at the exhibits, lots of events going on. It was really great to see big groups of school children going in to learn about climate change and see some of the information on show. So that difference between the two areas of the COP was quite telling yesterday. And going into today, really we want to see obviously nature being high on the agenda again through the discussions today. We'll see what the announcements are later on. But what we're most wanting to see is greater commitments to what we call the 30 by 30 pledge. So this is a global pledge to restore and recover 30% of land and sea for nature by 2030. It's also a UK pledge, and the Wildlife Trusts signed up to that pledge this time last year, so we've had it for about a year now. And the trusts all around the country, all 46 trusts, are doing an awful lot of work to do their own 30 by 30 pledges across the country, whether that's making wetlands wet again, restoring peatlands, restoring degraded land. All these things make a big difference to the 30 by 30 pledge. But we want to see the UK government really taking this seriously as well. And so far we've seen the government sign up to the 30 by 30 pledge, but the way they're interpreting it is actually quite different. So they're suggesting that 26% of land and sea is already protected for nature, but that's just through the naming of those areas, the designations. It's not through the restoring and the recovery of nature. And the analysis that's been done suggests that actually only about 3% of UK land and sea is currently being actively restored and recovered for nature. So we definitely want to see much more ramping up of that level of ambition, both globally on 30 by 30 and domestically as well. And we've got a great infographic that's available that explains this more as well. So if we're going to see government investing much more heavily in nature and reaching the 30 by 30 goal, we need to see a lot more investment in this area as well. And we estimate that needs about £1 billion of investment per year. And earlier this week, Elliot, who is our head of public affairs, talked to Richard Walker, managing director of Iceland Foods, about his views on 30 by 30, how businesses can engage, and the work that he's been doing through his role as well.
So Richard, many thanks for joining us today at this busy but potentially momentous time in history as world leaders gather for the UN Climate Change Conference. You've long championed environmental issues, pushing for greater action to reverse nature's loss and also to tackle climate change. And of course, this led you to become an ambassador for the Wildlife Trust last year and a patron for your local Cheshire Wildlife Trust. In your role as Managing Director for Iceland Foods, you've also led many sustainability initiatives. So could you just start telling me why you think it's important for businesses to have nature in recovery?
I think, quite frankly, there's a realization now by business that it's of growing importance. I mean, if you consider the survival of the human race, nature is our biggest ally in terms of absorbing all of the excess carbon that we're producing. Nature absorbs 50% of all man-made emissions. And in turn, it's also very important, of course, to business. And I think it's now everyone's business to make sure that nature is given enough space to breathe, which is why the Wildlife Trust 30 by 30 campaign is so important. But also it's about protecting future business models. If you look at my own industry, the food industry, we rely on healthy soils and healthy farming techniques. And of course, farming in the UK has been at war with nature for far too long. So this is about the long-term validity of our business.
So you mentioned the Wildlife Trust 30 by 30 campaign, and that's a campaign to get 30% of land and sea in recovery, connected and protected for nature by 2030. And the government have committed to this target, but maybe we don't think their level of ambition has been strong enough. Do you think the government could do more to get us on the target to 30% of land and sea connected and protected for nature by 2030?
Yeah, absolutely. And like you say, connected as well is so important so that we can create corridors for wildlife. I think, of course, the government can do more, and therefore it's down to the fantastic work of NGOs like the Wildlife Trust, but also business leaders as well, to say, look, we are up for this. This is important to our business models. And we think this is the right thing to do from a long-term economic security point of view as well.
So that was Richard Walker, Managing Director of Iceland Foods and a huge supporter of the Wildlife Trusts. Now here in the UK, if we're really going to be playing our part to help tackle the climate emergency, obviously we've got to make sure we're doing everything we can to stop burning fossil fuels in this country. But if we're going to get to net zero, we have to be putting nature into recovery. Nature needs net zero because climate represents a huge threat to nature, but equally, if we're going to achieve net zero, we need nature to help us in that task. And so at the Wildlife Trust, we're very clear that we've set this target of making sure we get 30% of our land and sea in the UK into recovery by 2030. 30 by 30, as Kathryn was saying earlier, is the equivalent really of the 1.5 degree target on climate, but our target for nature, getting 30% of our land and sea in recovery by 2030. And last year, 14 months ago, the Wildlife Trust launched an appeal to help us get started on that, to kickstart that work. We're trying to raise £30 million to get that work moving here in the UK with the Wildlife Trust. So I'm delighted that 14 months in, we've already raised £25 million in support of that work, supporting projects right across the UK, restoring our peatlands, getting them wet again so that they can suck carbon out the air, and that we can expand those peatlands and they can hold water back in the landscapes, protecting, restoring our wetlands, getting our wetlands wet again so that they do the job that nature intended, to make sure that actually again they're holding that water back in the landscape, protecting communities from extreme weather and from flooding, so that water is in wetlands rather than in people's homes, and making sure also that we're restoring our seagrasses, which are actually one of our most important habitats for storing carbon in our marine environment. So please get involved, support our campaign. £25 million raised over the last 14 months, absolutely incredible, but we're so desperate and so keen to get to that £30 million target to really kickstart nature's recovery in this country. So please donate, please get involved. You can follow the links on the screen now. Join us for tomorrow's update, where we'll be hearing directly from young people about what they want to see from COP26, and also we're learning more about what the Wildlife Trust is doing to empower young people to take action for a wilder future. So see you tomorrow.